Hi everyone, just switching over to the main camera there. Welcome to another Hatton's Model Railways SkillsCast session where I show you some of the skills that you can learn to transform your layout into a fully working model railway. And today we're looking at fitting crew to our locomotives. We're starting with steam engines in part 1, and a future video will cover more modern locomotives such as diesels, electric and multiple units too. So let's get started with today's session. I'll be showing you some of the different ways you can fit figures to your 00, O and N gauge locomotives, and even more scales if you do have the figures available. I'll be talking you through some of the different packs that you can buy with different characters and different poses, and of course showing you the right and some of the wrong ways you can fit these into your locomotives too. As ever, if you've got any questions throughout the stream, please put them in the chat and I'll answer as many as I can there. But if you're watching a little later on, please do put your comments underneath the video or get in touch with our customer experience team who would be more than happy to help you out too. So let's get started. And adding a crew is a really quick way, really easy way to add a lot of life and character to your model railways. It's got to be the most simple transformation to really enhance your locomotives. I've always thought they look a little strange running around without any staff driving them in model form. So putting a driver and a fireman, as would be appropriate in these different engines, really does add to your scene. And we have lots of different packs available. We've got the Scenecraft packs available right now. These come in packs of 6 in all different poses. And we have the PD Marsh figures that are available too in 00 and N gauge. A lot of these come in characteristic uniforms, as we can see here, covering a number of different guises. And although they do look a little grainy close up, you've got to bear in mind that on your screen at the moment, there will be many, many times bigger than they will be on your locomotives. So we'll get started in putting some of those in. So the first thing to do, always, before you start anywhere, even if you've got figures, glue and your tools at the ready, is to have a research of the locomotives you have chosen. I've chosen one of the recent Dapol 43XX releases and our Hatton's original P-Class here. So I've had a look around the internet, I've seen some books too, to see exactly where the crews would be on these models. Because it's certainly not just a case of putting 2 figures in a cab and then that's it. We've really got to understand, especially with the different poses that you can get the figures in, as you can see here, why they are in those poses and what positions they need to be in to operate the locomotives. So seeing a locomotive cab here, this is a Midland Railway single locomotive at the National Railway Museum. And this is a left-hand drive locomotive. So the driver stands on the left-hand side of this loco, I believe, and then sees the line on that side. So we need to make sure the driver would be on the left-hand side of this locomotive. But we've got the various different equipment there. In fact, actually, I think it might be a right-hand drive. I do apologise because the reverser is over on the right-hand side with the cut-off valve there. And then the regulator is in the middle, which are the 2 main controls that the driver uses. So if you're not too sure, again, have a bit of a look around on the internet out there and you'll see whether the locomotives are set up a left or right-hand drive. Most of the locomotives in the UK are left-hand drive with the exception of a lot of the Great Western locomotives. But as you'll see, some of the fittings in the cabs there are quite obvious when you see which one's which, and you'll know exactly what to pose your driver and fireman against. But heading over to our P-Class, a lot of the locomotives in preservation, and certainly the images I found, actually show the driver and the fireman leaning outside the cab, such as this. With very tight cabs on these locomotives, it's pretty tricky to stay in there all the time on these locos. So a lot of drivers do stand on the outside of the cabs, as you can see here. And another important part of this is also to consider which direction your locomotive will mainly be going in. If it's mainly travelling bunker first, as we see here, or backwards, as you may want to call it, it may be worth posing the driver facing that way on your layout. So let's head over to our little workbench and we'll get a close-up on putting some of these items in. So I head over to where our P-Class is, and I've already started to disassemble this model, as you can see here. We can put the chassis out of the way for today. We won't be needing that. And then I've broken that down just into its component parts, as you can see there. So we've already got a full place for our driver to sit on the bottom of the cab floor here. And we can see there that the full cab interior is ready for that to be inserted. So I'll get our crew out of the packet, ready to be fitted. So we've got a choice of 4 today. So we'll certainly be having a driver and a fireman in these traditional uniforms. These guys here are suitable for industrial railways and some of the older Victorian Edwardian schemes too, in these earlier style bib and brace uniforms that you see here with the flat caps on. So we're going to be putting these in our earlier locomotive. Just to make sure they fit absolutely fine, I always take a small piece of grey tack or black tack that you might have and just make sure that they do fit before gluing them down. So looking at the inside of our P-class, we need to get the driver roughly about here. So then he will be reaching for the regulator, but also stood roughly outside the cab. So just as a temporary fit, I will put a small amount of grey tack on his foot there. And then we'll get him in place. So this is only a temporary fit. They don't need to be in 100% securely at this point. We'll then pose our fireman the other way around. So he's just bringing some of the coal around there and putting it into the firebox. So we've got those two ready as a trial fit. The reason we're trying this trial fit is to make absolutely certain that everything goes back on. And if not, whether we need to do any little adjustments or refinement. So just pressing that down gently. May just need to lift that one up. Yeah, and we can see there already that whilst our fireman's okay on the inside, our driver has fallen over. So he did come into contact when we were putting that in. So if we would have glued that down, it would have been a little more tricky there to sort that out. But you can see that just a little bit of adjustment is required. So a little bit of trial and error to make sure they are coming into contact with none of the details. So again, we'll just make sure he's in there pretty secure this time. And we'll put that down as per. So it is a little bit trickier to do with locomotives with full cabs such as this. But just bear in mind that you can always reach in afterwards with a set of tweezers as per so and pull them around too to make sure that not only are they in the right positions as we wanted them and they fit, but they also look good in the cab interior there too. So our fireman there is now reaching over to get some more coal out of the bunker that we fitted with the real coal in a previous video. So if you wanted to, you can then leave them at that. So they are fully removable there now, as Dak has asked in the chat. You can leave them with the black tack or the grey tack on. It will be a little less pleasing visually, but you have then got the option of either putting crew in different locomotives or removing them if you want to put them in a siding or a shed. Just bear in mind, you will have to do the full installation and deconstruction of your locomotive to remove or put them in as you wish on a locomotive with a full cab such as this. So it may be something you may want to make a little more permanent, but if you are wanting to move them around onto different locomotives, you can use something like this black or grey tack to make sure that whilst they stay in, they don't stay in permanently. You will find, as we've seen before with this, putting the figures in there, they're not quite as bonded to the locomotive, so they may move around inside the cab when you move your locomotive around. If you're wanting them to have a perfect fit, you are better off looking at fitting these figures to the locomotives permanently with glue. So hope that's answered the removal question there, but let's get started in keeping some of our figures in. So I'll move our P-class out of the way for now, let our driver and fireman have a quick break, and we'll move over to our locomotive here. So separating the loco and the tender, let's quickly move that tender out of the way. Unfortunately, we get a little bit of a bonus this time. We don't actually need to disassemble the locomotive any further. We already have a full cab that we can see here, fully open cab, and we can see some of the cab details in there too. So we'll see the reverser here on the right hand side and the regulator on the right hand side too. So this is a Great Western Railway right hand drive locomotive. Some of the figures we offer are seated, but these seats don't come down on this particular locomotive, so we will have to have standing figures on our loco. So I'll just bring you back over to the camera here now, and we'll get started. So we've still got two of our other figures in this pack. We have one who is holding the regulator, and we have a fireman again shoveling some coal out of the tender. So we'll get these fitted into our locomotive, but this time we'll use glue and we'll make them a fully permanent installation. So I'll just bring you back over to the little camera there, which I think might just be having a small issue actually. I'll just bring you back to me for 1 second. I'll try and get that going again now. Bear with me 1 second. No, I think we've got an unfortunate little issue with that small camera there. I do apologise there, guys. We're having a little bit of an intermittent problem with that particular screen. But I'll carry it out here for you, and then what I'll do is I'll try and get that camera working again so you can see a little bit of a close-up. So bear with me 1 second. I'll just put some glue onto my mat here. So I'm just using standard super glue as we have available in many different forms, including the rocket glue that you see here. So I will put that on there now. Very small drop of that particular glue onto the side there. And I think I have lost the small camera, unfortunately, so I can't quite show you this in exactly the same level of detail, but I will do my best to describe it as I go and I do the installation for you now. So if you've any particular questions and you can't see too closely, I do apologise that my little camera has just gone off, but I will do my best to describe it to you. In fact, I'll just check that is working. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm having some issues on the other side there, so I do apologise about that. What I'll do as well is I'll put some close-up detailed photos of this on the video. And Ono, you are absolutely right. You can tell I'm live today, as I am on every single one of these live streams. Sometimes we do get little bugs, but we certainly work through them and still bring you some great bits of details too. So what I'm doing here today now is putting on just a tiny little bit of glue using my cocktail stick there. I've put that straight onto a small plastic bag that I had spare, and I'll just put that onto the feet. With our other videos where we've fitted details and other items, it certainly is less is more when it comes to the glue. So just enough there to cover the feet. And this is our driver, so we're going to make sure we put him on the right hand side of the cab, reaching for the regulator. I'll just do that and then I'll try and give you a bit of a close-up. You may just need to hold that in place either with a pair of tweezers while it sits in. In fact, I will just grab my tweezers, make sure that sits in there, put a little bit of glue on the side. Again, just making sure you've not got too much glue on the feet, but you have got enough glue to make sure the figurine is fully secure. So I'll just make sure he goes in there. And again, just making sure that bond does take place on the bottom of the cab. Usually takes about 10 seconds or so to glue this on. And as Steve's mentioned there, if you're not looking for a permanent installation, you can use items such as Techie Wax. But I've always found that the glue there is the best way to go for that. So again, really sorry that I can't give you a full close-up on this. I will do my best now to bring it as close to the camera as possible for you. But you'll see that we've glued our driver in and his hand is millimeters away from the item there. In fact, I may have just got my camera back there, so we'll give this a go, guys. If we can get our little camera going again, it's the perfect time to. It looks like we're in business. That's fantastic, just when I needed it. So you can see here now we've fitted our driver, reaching for the regulator there on the locomotive. So that is there coming in then, and he is reaching and driving the loco there too. In real life, he'd probably be a little bit over to the right, actually, to be able to handle the reverser too. But you can see we've got a fairly good join on the bottom. He's perfectly secure with a little bit of tapping there on that. So what I'll do, now I've got you back on the small camera, is I will fit the fireman too, and I'll show you some of the details. So again, just the tiniest little bit of glue on the end of a cocktail stick. Wipe that on his feet. just so you can see the glue taking there. And again, less is certainly more on this, so you don't get any glue marks in the cab or otherwise. Grabbing him again. Make sure we can get him alongside the driver there. In fact, let's have him facing the other way. So he's getting some coal from the tender to bring in to the loco. It might just be best if I do this with my hands. I realise it's not the best for a stream, unfortunately, but make sure he's in there. Give him a few moments to dry. And then he is reaching back into the centre of our tender, as per so. I'll just show you that with the tender lined up. And then he'll be heading over to get some of the coal out of the tender with the fall plate in place there then too. So it really is that easy to install figures into your locomotives. And apologies for some of the little camera issues there too. But we have got there in the end, so I can show you how these have been fitted either temporarily with the tacky wax or the glue, sorry, not the glue, the black tack as we did before, or the glue now that we have the permanent figures fitted into our 43XX as we see here. And I don't know about you guys, but I certainly think, especially with these open cab locomotives here, this really does enhance the level of detail in these locomotives. A couple of questions coming up regarding the resale value, etc., at the moment. Great one there from Dak asking that. Now, we do sometimes find that it actually has a positive impact on the resale value. Some people do want to have their locomotives pre-provided with crew, so sometimes it can have a positive impact, especially if they have been added in a really good way and look very realistic in the locomotives too. Of course, if you're not too fussed about that and you wanted to keep your items so you could return them into completely as new condition, I would recommend using the grey tack or a removable adhesive such as tacky wax or the tack that we see here. You can still have your crew in there if you want, but then you can remove them to return your locomotives into as new condition. But if you're wanting them to stay in there permanently with a full connection, the best way to do it is with a little bit of super glue, or as I've got here on display, something like the rocket glue that I've got here, very thin glue, just so you don't cause any stains or extra little marks. And again, less is more there, so putting on the details with a cocktail stick. I really would never put glue straight onto the locomotive footplate or straight onto the figures themselves. You'll always find you get a little bit too much, so you do get a little bit more control just putting glue onto the end of a cocktail stick. You can never get more or less if you've only got that little bit on the end of your stick there. And I think those guys look great already. We've got a team there now working on this locomotive, the driver tending to the regulator and the fireman there heading into the tender for another round of coal to keep this locomotive steaming along the tracks and working on your layout too. I wouldn't recommend using PVA really, mainly because it takes a little longer to join than we would like. I really would recommend sticking with the super glue on this one. It will bond over time, but you may find that it takes a little bit longer for you to dry there on. So if you can, do stick with the super glue as we have just advised. But just again, to cover some of the top tips I've recommended today, always try a little test fit beforehand to make sure your loco crew fit exactly where you want them, especially in the smaller cab locomotives or the locomotives with a full cab, as you can see here. If you've got a pair of tweezers to hand, keep those to hand too, because it may just need a little bit of tweaking and twisting when the crew are in there to make sure they're in exactly the perfect positions. Always use the glue with a cocktail stick so you've got the items on there too and you don't get too much glue on your locos. And last but not least, take some inspiration from the prototype to see where the real life drivers and firemen choose to stand on their particular locomotives. A lot of these people have got many years experience on either the original or the preserved locos, so they know exactly the right places to stand, drive and fire the locomotives from and to. Also have a look at the various different equipment and controls in the cab to see what the actual driver and fireman would need to be able to reach and to decide whether your locomotive is right or left-hand drive. And finally, have a look at the poses that your figures are supplied in. Are they shoveling coal? Are they handling some of the equipment in the cab? Are they sat down? Are they stood up? Does your locomotive have a seat? Does it have space for crew, such as you see here? There is a little bit of science to it, but at the same time, once you've spotted some of the simple facts and figures that we've pointed out to you today, you'll really start to be able to handle putting realistic locomotive crew in the right place into your locos on your layout. And I don't know what you guys think, but I certainly think it really had an extra charm for not a lot of work, actually, just to be able to put some of the different characters, as we see here in our 43XX, just adds a little bit of life to the locomotive, especially this design with the flickering firebox too. Maybe on a nighttime scene with the firebox flickering against the crew figures in there would create a really atmospheric model railway. So all of the crew we've got here today, the Scenecraft crew that you can see in the packs of 6, and the 00 and N versions of the PD Marsh crew. We've also got crew figures for you guard and narrow gauge modelers. We've got O gauge figures available too. And the skills I've shown you today, whilst they are on the 00 scale models, are all applicable to models of every single scale for steam locomotives. So if you've not seen your scale being treated here today, follow these simple rules and you'll be able to enhance your models too with figures such as these. If you're a modern image modeler, if you've got diesels, electrics, or multiple units, the skills are pretty much the same, but we'll be covering a part 2 of this video tomorrow to show you how to fit crew to those locomotives and multiple units. And again, giving you some guidance on just who, what, when, and where you need to put in the cabs and in other parts of your locomotives too. So I hope you've enjoyed today's SkillsCast session. I hope I've given you a little bit of inspiration to fit some figures into your locomotives. If you've got any more questions or you'd like to learn a little bit more, don't hesitate to put a comment underneath the video or get in touch with our customer experience team, who will be more than happy to help you out with any advice that we can offer. Everything I've got here today, including the glue, the tools, the crew, and the locomotives, are available right now from hattons.co.uk. So head over to our website. Again, the link is below, and that's got a link to all the crew figures for steam locomotives that we have available at the moment. Otherwise, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. If there's any more videos you'd like to see regarding this in the future, please do let us know. And obviously, stay tuned in for part 2 tomorrow on the modern image figures, putting those into your locos too. Otherwise, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.